You're not there to serve an interest group, or you're not there to serve an agenda. You're there to serve society. And the best columns, I think, are the ones that ask a question that's the right question at the time. If it's a question that's going to make people uncomfortable, sometimes that's a sign that it's the one that you should be asking.
We were so far ahead of the curve that even the law enforcement in the US were asking us for copies of our newspapers. And that's happened as well with the authorities in Germany, in the UK and France have all contacted us at different times looking for a copy of, what we've written about the so-called dead zoo gang.
It'll stay with me forever because I had such a personal connection to it, not only because I'm a woman and I'm from that area, but I also felt like I was helping thousands of other women in Ireland to share and to speak about their stories.
What we uncovered was that FBD had sold the policies to a number of businesses specifically to cover coronavirus. And then once it did come and they were potentially on the hook for all these losses, they changed their position and said, we won't be paying out your claims and we're very sorry.
So our editor, Des Gibson, said, we're going to boycott this fight. We're not going to cover it in our sports pages. We're not going to give it any praise so long as Daniel Kinahan is involved. To make that statement was more powerful than any story I could have written or any of my colleagues really could have written about it at that point.
These were people who were in the first stages of grief, a lot of them. In a way, you're counselling them through all of that and trying to tell the story and get a message across about how horrific this is.
These decisions are being made in Brussels, thousands of miles away, but they're ultimately going to affect what happens on Irish farms. We're putting in the hours of analysis, the days of reading and the weeks of pursuing a particular story. That's something that farmers don't necessarily have the time to do for themselves.
Justice shouldn't be only done in public, it should also be seen to be done in public. So it's important for us to, I suppose, present the evidence to the public, what's been said in court. And also it's up to us to give somebody like Adrian a voice and to tell his story as well, which he obviously can't do because of the actions of Aaron Brady.
They were so frustrated and concerned that the bill had still not been implemented. So I thought by us working in the newspaper that we had a platform we could give them to share those stories and at the same time put pressure on the government to speed up the process of implementing this bill.
I think that journalism has helped us to challenge these outdated cultural norms and paradigms like misogyny, like victim blaming, like tribalism. I would like to think that if this tragedy unfolded in 2021 as opposed to 2013 when it did, that Rebecca would have had a very different experience.
We will look back on this period in our lives in the same way that maybe our grandparents look back on the Second World War. And I think journalists' job during this pandemic has been to, write the first draft of history and to chart the extraordinary decisions that were taken and were publicly announced and what was going on behind the scenes.
Professional journalists work with many rules and constraints. And it's when we have gone through the rigours of all of that, the verifiable truth comes out at the end. And if society doesn't have verifiable truth, then society is at risk.
We've seen the government move to change the complete way that the vaccine is given since these stories started. We've seen a contract pulled to a private hospital who was administering the vaccine. We've seen the chief executive of a state-run company step aside because of journalism. So one thing is clear, journalism can have a clear, meaningful impact, and it does.